The Vancouver-based mining company proposing to build the $20 billion Frontier Oil Sands mine in northern Alberta has set a target of being, quote, carbon neutral by 2050. The federal government's decision on the project will come by the end of the month, but today Teck Resources says it will try to achieve net zero emissions by avoiding the creation of new emissions, then eliminating or minimizing them. Could that claim boost the project's chance of approval? Peter Schiefke is the Parliamentary Secretary to Environment Minister Jonathan Wilkinson. Shannon Stubbs, next to him, is the Conservatives' Natural Resources critic, and Richard Cannings is the NDP's Natural Resources critic. They all join us from the House of Commons foyer. Hi there. Nice to see you all. Thanks very much for being with us. Mr. Schiefke, I'll start with you. Teck Resources committed, as we just outlined, to the goal of net zero emissions by 2050. Does that change the calculation for your government in assessing the project?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of Cabinet, but I can say that it is part of the information that will be a part of the decision-making process. You know, we promised Canadians back in 2015 and again last year that we would move forward with growing the economy and protecting the environment. And the one thing that we're doing with this project, as we've done with all projects of this size and scope, is to make sure we're following a process. So we've been going through that process. 2016, we put in place the Joint Review Panel. They had consultations up till 2018, put in place that report that came out last year that basically said we have to, as a cabinet, make a decision by the end of February. And I can tell you that that will come. We plan on delivering upon that requirement by the end of February. And as I said, it will take into consideration all of the information, including the announcement made by the company today, which we always welcome. We know that if we are going to meet our goal of making Canada net zero by 2050, we're not only going to require the collaboration of the provinces and territories, but also of companies like this one.
You know, though, Mr. Schiefke, that the Joint Review Panel, in assessing this project, did say that it may make it more difficult, the operation and the production of it may make it more difficult to meet the Paris climate targets. And those are the targets that were set by your government prior to even that 2050 net zero goal.
Well, yeah, and that's something that Cabinet's going to have to look at, and they're going to have to look diligently at it. Canadians are expecting us to follow through in our commitment to not only meet but exceed the Paris targets and ensure that Canada is net zero by 2050. They want to make sure at the same time that we're putting in place job opportunities for all Canadians, including Albertans who are looking for employment opportunities right now. So that's the decision that will have to be made by a Cabinet in the couple of weeks leading up to the end of February, and we look forward to making sure that that's shared with all Canadians and members of the House, regardless of party, in due time.
Ms. Stubbs, I know over the past few days you've been making a case for the economic significance, as has the Alberta government, of this. I want to outline some of that. 7,000 jobs, the Joint Review Panel said that the company put forth during construction, 2,500 operation jobs over the 41-year lifetime of the mine. It would also create or leave over those 40 years $12 billion in taxes to the federal government, $55 billion to the Alberta government. That said, that same panel did, as I just told Mr. Schiefke, outline that it will, if this mine comes through and it does operate, it may make it more difficult to meet those Paris climate targets. What do you say to Canadians who are worried about Canada's commitment to the cause?
Well, the additional aspects of the recommendation for approval by the independent science, evidence, and expert-based review also include the complete support of all of the local Indigenous communities, including signed agreements with 14 of them, and world-class environmental measures that will meet the 62 conditions attached to the original recommendation for approval. So the question you've asked is really up to the Liberal Cabinet, and it is really up to the Prime Minister and the Liberals to account.
But with respect, I'm asking the Conservatives, who say they're also concerned about climate change, right? How do you rectify the economic points that you make, and even the science that is put forth by the company, some of which is supported by the Joint Review Panel, with the assertion that the Joint Review Panel made, which is that, yes, the emissions that this project creates will make it harder to reach our targets?
And that same joint panel recommended approval of the Teck Frontier mine in the national interests of Canada.
Did. Yeah, right. But it also stated that other fact.
So I think, sure, but Conservatives are asking for the Liberals to approve the Teck Frontier mine based on all of those factors combined. What's happening here now is remaining days for a political decision for the Liberal Cabinet to make. That's why, for example, the Government of Alberta is calling for its approval and putting this decision in the context of a potential national unity crisis. This is about confidence in Canada as a place for energy investment and development. And this is, what Canadians Canadians should be aware of is that the review on the Tech Frontier mine took place over 8 years, half of that process under the Liberal government just prior to this election. And the experts have recommended it for approval. So sure, within the law, the Liberal cabinet has the complete prerogative to wait until the end of February to make this decision. But also in the context of the recommendation having been made in June of more than $100 billion in energy projects having been cancelled in Canada over the last 5 years, and 200,000 workers out of work in a crisis in this sector. I think Canadians everywhere, including the world, are watching this decision, and that's why we're calling on the Liberal government to accept the independent recommendation and approve the Tech Frontier mine in a timely way.
Mr. Cannings, if Teck does, in fact, as they are, pledge to get to net zero by 2050, if the federal government were to attach a condition to its approval in which it makes sure that Alberta legislates the equivalent, that it as a province gets to net zero by 2050, is this project something your party would support?
Well, I mean, I'm very happy to hear that Teck has a pledge to get to net zero by 2050. It's got operations outside Canada. It has a big footprint in my riding, one of the biggest employers in my riding with the big zinc smelter at Trail. So I'm happy to hear that they have made that pledge, but I can't see how a project that they're putting forward here, the Frontier mine, with what experts say will produce 4 to 6 megatons of carbon dioxide, carbon in the atmosphere each year. That's the same as, a province of British Columbia, all the cars in British Columbia. And that will be going on for 40 years, how they will be able to make that pledge and get to net zero with that project. It's clear that if the Liberal government okays this project, they'll be throwing out the Paris targets completely. And instead, what the government should be doing is moving forward with Alberta with a plan to diversify the economy and get real sustainable.
But with respect, Mr. Cannings, that takes time, right? These are thousands of potential jobs that could be created with a more specific timeline.
Well, it takes time, yes, but they could start, for instance, we've been hearing in the news just in the last few days, but over the last months and years, of, for instance, all the orphaned wells in Alberta and all the cleanup that has to be done around orphaned wells, around cleanup around the oil sands. That's something that the federal government could put serious money, billions of dollars into to clean up the environment, and those
I agree, that's
jobs
been a problem
are
for
good
decades.
resource jobs that would pay the same.
But would they be 9,000 jobs?
Well,
I take your point. I'm not disagreeing on the orphan wells, by the way. I've studied it too. There's a lot of work that could and should have been done over the past few decades. But will it create this many jobs?
Well, this project, the CEO has said it's unlikely that it will ever go ahead. So I don't know what timeline you're looking at or what timeline those jobs, those 7,000 jobs will appear. But I think there's a really good opportunity here to put forward a real plan, a sustainable plan to diversify the economy of Alberta and all of Canada, to get people working with good jobs that would not have either have a neutral environmental impact or a negative one, one that would reduce our carbon outputs, a positive for the environment. And that's what I think this government needs to do. If it comes forward and says yes to this mine project, it's saying that's all out the window. We're giving up on the Paris target.
Just to be clear, though, I didn't hear the CEO of the company say it's not going to go ahead. I heard him stipulate a number of conditions, market conditions, especially, for example, like the price of oil that need to be there in order for it to go ahead. I take your point, though. Mr. Schiefke, just a quick final question to you. Is there going to be an actual decision by Cabinet made by the end of February, or is the option of further delaying the decision still on the table?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of Cabinet. We do know the deadline is the end of February. They have several options on the table. The one thing that I'm really happy
so you're
we
still
did
open.
here tonight,
So government is still open to delaying this decision beyond February. Just to be clear.
Oh, I can't speak on behalf of Cabinet. What I can say is they are hoping to render a decision by the end of February in accordance with the timeline stipulated by law. And what I really appreciate about tonight is showing just how challenging this decision is and this topic is. It shows that this project calls into question whether or not we're going to be able to meet our targets, while at the same time proposes the creation of employment opportunities for Canadians. And that's
Your
the
colleagues
balance.
there don't look convinced.
Well, that's the balance that we promised Canadians we would try to find, and we think we've been able to do that over the last 5 years, and we hope with this
Except for
decision to be able
you're
to
not
move
meeting your targets.
forward with that.
And that
Well,
the Tech Frontier Mine will absolutely benefit
if we're
all
talking-
of Canada, just as the oil sands do create jobs in every single province in the country. And this project in particular will use world-class environmental measures and standards.
Well,
just
actually,
as the
to
oil
be
sands
fair,
are a
that's
leader
to be fair,
in
that's
overall
to be
emissions
fair,
reductions
to be fair,
with
please,
development
to be
around-
fair, that's a claim the
around the
company
world.
made, that the Joint Review Panel agreed the evidence did not bear out. They did not see evidence to support that during the hearings. But just on that point, however, I could keep this discussion going for a long time. I can't. Thank you very much to all three of you for your time this evening, though. Peter
Thank you,
Schiefke,
Vashi.
Shannon Stubbs, and Richard Cannings. Really appreciate it.